Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Amy Wan. Thanks for being on the show, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Amy's the founder and CEO of Bootstrap Legal. I'm sure you've heard of it. She has authored LexisNexis Private Equity Capital Guide, and also worked in international regulatory and trade policy at the U.S. Department of Commerce, and was a presidential management fellow at the U.S. Department of State and U.S. Department of Transportation. Amy, thanks so much again for your time and being on the show. And give us a little of your background and what your focus is right now.
Yeah, sure. So, I am an attorney by training, starting off my career in the federal government, but really got my jump into real estate and securities and syndication when I became general counsel at the time, it was an early stage real estate crowdfunding platform that was doing fix and flip debt. And this was back in 2014 when, some of the crowdfunding regulations were just starting to go effective. So I think we were actually one of the first companies to use 506C, if your listeners are familiar with it. So I was general counsel there for 2 years. We did a lot of really innovative, novel legal things, right? And then I left and became partner at a boutique firm that specialized in real estate syndication. I think in 2017, I had this moment. I had met this up and coming syndicator who, he was really trying to make it in the business, but I met him at, this real estate summit in Oakland. And so when he came to me for his first deal, he said, "Hey, I want to raise $300,000. How much will the legal documents be?" And I told him, "Look, I can tell you the price, what my firm is going to charge. And then I know you will, I'm not going to feel offended because I know you're going to basically walk away and, probably do something under the table or whatever, because the pricing is not going to make sense for you." And so I told him the price, and sure enough, he did not, use proper documents for that deal. And, it made me think a lot, because I went to law school, I think, to help small business entrepreneurs, like not huge institutional funds or corporate America or anything like that. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense, because the smallest person trying to do a small raise, or the person who's just trying to get started in real estate syndication, they're not going to be able to do a large raise, and they're not going to be able to do this legally. And the SEC doesn't care. They don't care that you're a small business person. You just always have to comply. So I didn't think that the law was working out very well for smaller investors, smaller entrepreneurs. And at the same time, I was like, I went from a tech company to a regular law firm, and I was sitting there just drafting these documents manually every day, and I thought, this can be done faster, more cheaply, more efficiently, and not quite so manually. So in mid 2017, I left and I started Bootstrap Legal, and I call us like the TurboTax for real estate syndication legal documents, right? It's not 100%, done by an attorney, but it's not 100% like you're on your own, completely automated templates or anything like that either. It's kind of a hybrid mixture of both, so that you get, attorney level services, but with a lot more efficiency.
Nice. So I like the efficiency, and obviously the lower cost, or that you can provide documents and making sure these guys are doing it legally. It's interesting. You talk about the story where the guy, he walked away because of the cost, but he ended up not using the proper documents.
Yeah. And look, I am very aware that happens a lot in the real estate industry, right? Everyone's like, oh, joint ventures, but they're not not really joint ventures. They really are, doing securities offerings. But unfortunately, when I remember when I was at the firm, very rarely, almost never, did we write offering documents for $1 million or under raise. It didn't happen because the economics didn't make sense. And it's been interesting since I launched this company, because now we've done offerings for raises as small as $250,000. And obviously there's still going to be some raises that it doesn't make sense for us to do, right? Sometimes I have people calling for like $30,000 raises, $100,000. And at that point, you're so small. You're so small. You could do it. I don't know if you want to, but at least I think it's good in providing some more options.
Sure. You mentioned like joint venture versus security offerings. Maybe you could just elaborate on the difference just a little bit, so listener that's just getting started, he knows the difference between what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot of myths in the real estate space about what a joint venture actually is. But to me, the delineation is over how many investors you have and how active they actually are, right? Real estate syndication really is, you have, passive investors. For a joint venture, maybe you have at most a couple of people, but they all have to be, really active. They have to be at the level of business partners. And I'm not talking about like, oh, let's meet every Thursday and sip wine and decide on the color of the paint, but actually contributing a unique skill set to the venture. Otherwise, to me, that's not really a joint venture. And, to the extent you're taking their money and they're really a passive investor, then you're really starting a security.
I liked how you talked about, though, they're a business partner, but they're also contributing a unique skill set. And, 'cause I get that question a lot. Well, is it a syndication or can we just partner on a deal, And so obviously I say, well, I'm not an attorney, but what are they bringing to the table other than money, other than the capital?
Right. Exactly. So either they're helping raise capital and they're doing investor relations, they're bookkeeping, they're they're doing the financials, but they really have to be actively contributing to the business and not just be like, here's $50,000.
Yeah.
Please make money on it.
So, people that have never done a syndication, also get that often, what do I do? What does that look like to work with somebody like yourself? And, what do I need to do to make it legal and not to mess up? Right. I mean, I think it's worth making sure it's legal. Right. Right.
Yeah, sure. So, I do consultations and obviously a lot of people, before they talk to me the first time, they will go and they like do all this Googling around regulations and their brain's on fire and they try and figure out which regulation is the one for them. I am of the philosophy that a good attorney is also a really good business advisor, right? And so I don't think that the business person or the syndicator should have to sit there and figure out, what is the best regulation for me. I think a good conversation between the syndicator and their attorney is, okay, here are my goals. Here are the ways I'm hoping to reach out to people to raise capital. What are my options and what parameters do I have to fit in, right? Another question I get really often is, people are like, they come to me and they're like, oh, hey, I'm working towards becoming a syndicator. How do I actually work with you? How do I work with an attorney? And usually I tell them that I don't think that they have to really worry about it until they're about to do their first deal. But once they are under contract for a piece of property, they need to pick up the phone and call right away, because you mentioned like, oh, it's great to have a lower cost solution, but I think actually our number one sell is not our pricing. I think it's speed, right? Mm. Once you go under contract to purchase a piece of property, you have a limited number of days to actually raise money, to bring that money to the table to close. And if you don't bring that money to the table, maybe you lose the deal if they don't give you an extension. So I think that's the primary draw. And I think the absolute best thing that someone can do if they want to get into syndication, I call it ABN, always be networking, right? Because by the time you find that deal that you really like, and then you want to turn around and ask people for money and raise capital, it's too late. You should have been building your network beforehand. So, to the folks who aren't going to, partner with someone else who can bring the money to the table and they're going to try and do it themselves, I think the best thing that they can do is to go out and network with accredited investors, with the real estate syndication community, so that they know who to call on, and they know, people's different appetites when they actually want to get people to fund their project.
Nice. Yeah, and I agree completely. You'll always be networking. I like that. It's the biggest part of the raising capital business, right? Who is Vinney Chopra? Came to the U.S. from India with $7 in his pocket, and today he has created a portfolio of over $200 million in commercial real estate. He's a CEO of 5 companies, acquiring and managing diverse multifamily portfolio of 3,500 units, and his team self-manage all the assets. Vinney has walked the walk with over 26 successful syndications during multiple economic cycles, including downturns over 12 years. He has built a very extensive educational academy to teach and mentor investors. Vinney, tell us about this Multifamily Syndication Academy.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you so much. I'm really proud to really talk to everybody about this extensive multifamily academy that teaches new and sophisticated investors how to use other people's money through syndications. That has been my world, to buy apartments from 50 units to 500 units, and how to select emerging markets, how to do deal analyzing, investor education, other people money, syndication blueprints. Everything I have learned, I teach in this academy, and over 500 lectures, and also how to manage the assets also, and along with lots of great templates and PowerPoints, everything. And I personally also mastermind coach all my students every Wednesday. So to reach me, Whitney, all the students have to, or investors have to, just text the word learn, 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 to 474747, or call my team at 925-766-3518.
So, help us to make sure we're doing that legally. And how we're contacting these people, when we're contacting them. I know getting started in this business, people always wonder, well, can this person invest even though, I already have this deal, but I just met them, and, all that.
Yeah. So how you can go approach an investor really depends on what kind of regulation you're raising under, right? The vast majority of capital that's raised in the US is raised under Regulation D, Rule 506B, right? And this has been around for decades. And it's super simple. You can raise as much as you want, but you are limited in the number of non-accredited investors that you can bring in. And you cannot do what we call general solicitation. That's basically lawyer speak for advertising, right? So, you can raise as much as you want, but there's strings on attached as to who you can raise from. You can raise from as many rich people or accredited investors as you want, and basically a handful of non-rich people. And you cannot generally advertise. So you can't do Twitter advertisements. You can't put Facebook advertisements. You can't go onto LinkedIn and be like, I'm raising $5 million for 123 Main Street. Come invest with me, right? You have to reach out to people who you already have a relationship with them, and you know that they're relatively sophisticated and they understand the risks of what they're investing in. And that can become a very technical exercise. Now, something that's relatively newer is this regulation called 506C, as in cat. And this is what I call accredited crowdfunding, right? So you can raise as much as you want, but suddenly you cannot raise from any non-accredited, sophisticated people anymore, right? You can only raise from accredited investors, and you actually have to verify that they're accredited. But what I always say is, what the SEC giveth, the SEC taketh away. So because they are limiting you to accredited investors only, now you're allowed to take extra liberties. And those liberties are that you can generally solicit, right? So that means that you can go out with a megaphone and tell the entire world, hey, I have 123 Main Street under contract. I need $5 million to bring to the closing table. Come give me your money. You can say that. You can't say whatever you want. You can't say anything that's fraudulent, but there's a wide liberty on what you can say. What I will say though is that I get a lot of calls from people who come to me and they're like, oh, I want to start a real estate crowdfunding site, or, oh, I want to do a 5-6C. And that's fine. But I think a lot of times people don't really understand how to use 5-6C effectively, right? I think if you're going to get the most bang out of your buck for a 5-6C, you want to have a lot of capital to be able to spend on advertising, right? And I don't think, the best way to do it is to say, oh, like I'm starting off as a real estate syndicator. I need to go out and advertise to everyone. No, you always start off with your family and friends, because it does not matter if someone clicks on an ad or whatever. At the end of the day, no matter how they find you, the thing that's going to matter most, whether you're crowdfunding or not, is can this investor trust you with their money, right? They're going to due diligence you. They're going to want to see your track record. And if this is the first time you're doing real estate syndication, you have no track record. It's not a very good sell, right? And immediately they don't trust you very much. So a lot of people that approach me thinking like crowdfunding is the way for, a relatively new syndicator to get started in the business, I think it's the exact opposite.
Why do not more experienced syndicators do 506C?
Actually, experienced syndicators do 506Cs. They just don't do it on every deal, right? So there's different level of experienced syndicators. Sometimes people who are very good at marketing or who have been around a lot, they have enough capital and they have enough within their investor base that they don't have to. Other times, if you get on a phone with an attorney who knows what they're talking about, there's actually a lot that you can do under 506B without saying that you're doing general solicitation, right? But for the people who do 506Cs, oftentimes they're doing a lot of 506Bs, and every once in a while, they're doing 5-6C so that they can advertise in a different way. And it's not necessarily to bring in investors on that particular deal. It is to bring in investors into the pipeline generally, and maybe a couple deals later, that person will invest. I think that's really, how you use a 5-6C effectively.
Mm-hmm. So, I like to ask, I get this question often too, what can I put on social media? And because I hear it often, or I see it on social media all the time. We just closed on this property or whatever. And I've heard mixed things about, can I put that on social media that we just closed this, or, is that a solicitation? Or I just would love to get your opinion.
So, if your capital raise is done, right, and you've closed and people can't invest, then to me, the offering's closed. So I think you can definitely go out and say that and say that. But if it's one of those situations where you were raising capital, you closed on the property, but you're still continuing to raise capital, I don't think you should talk about it, or I think you should be very judicious in how you're talking about it.
Sure.
I don't like to draw bright lines just because, like I said, there is a lot of flexibility in what you can do, but oftentimes it comes down to the exact wording and tone of what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Hmm. So, as far as the more experienced syndicators, what are some problems that you see that are more common with people that have been in the business for many years?
That's an interesting question. I think you're the first person to ask me that question. I think it's deal flow, right?
Mm.
It's not so much on the legal side. I would say it's probably deal flow and capital. Like sometimes people scale their business to the point where even if they have a large pool of investors, maybe they've exhausted it, right? And so they need to look for more capital. And on the other side, and I think this is happening right now and has been happening, at least for the past couple years, is, for example, in multifamily housing, cap rates are just not where they used to be. I think it's partly because of the cycle that we're in, but partly, I mean, I don't know about you, but at least to me, it seems like everyone seems to have fled into multifamily syndication lately.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's just become so competitive that it's hard to have a really good buy, right? Although I guess if the people are first time syndicators, they don't really know what they're doing, then and they mess it up, you could buy it as a distressed property.
So I guess, the guys that have been in the business a good while, I guess you don't see as many legal issues because they already have the relationship with people like yourself. They understand the importance of, of trusting someone like yourself to make sure that it's done legally, and they just know that the expense is well worth making sure it's done right.
Yeah, and I think it's usually the questions that come from more experienced syndicators end up being like super nuanced questions, right? Like, oh, we're having problems with this SDRA, like, or how do we do this particular thing? How do we accept money from this trust or something like that? So very like detailed, nuanced questions. They don't necessarily have the general questions so much anymore, but I will say that I think they have an appreciation that every single syndication still requires a new packet of paperwork because it genuinely is a different deal. And then secondly, I think what they appreciate most is speed, right? When you have 45, 60 days to bring a couple million or 10 or 20 million dollars to the table, everything comes down to like, I need this paperwork as quickly as possible so I can go and open a bank account and start accepting funds, and everything just becomes a super rush.
Nice. Amy, what would you say is the hardest part of this syndication business legally for you, or just getting into the syndication aspect legally? What's been the hardest part?
The hardest part, the funny thing is, I think with experienced syndicators, you don't have to spend nearly as much time. I think with the beginners, you have to spend a lot more time because there's hand holding and literally, I've had beginner clients who, they're doing great right now, right? But when they start off, they had no idea what they're doing, and I had to introduce them to a CPA, to someone who maybe they could partner with to help raise capital, to all these. They didn't even know how to do their financials, right? Or they didn't know how to put together their investor summary or deck. When you get someone who's doing their very first syndication, it definitely tends to take a lot more time, and they don't know what they don't know, so they literally ask you everything. And it's so funny because I guess sometimes what is just very apparent or intuitive to me, I'll get a question on it, and I have to explain it in a way where someone just has no context or background because they've just never done this before.
Mm. So is that something, a service you offer, or just something you're helping with more new people, like helping with the investor summary and things like that?
Well, I don't do that stuff. I refer them to other people who
Okay.
do that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But I do try to set them up with people that, if I can, if I know someone who can help them, I sometimes try to set them up with that because, I just want to see people, be able to grow and scale their businesses.
So, Amy, is there some way that you've recently improved your business that we could all apply to ours? Whether it's a tool that you really love to use, or that's helped your business, or a CRM, or some piece of software, anything.
Um, you know, uh, the thing that has taken me from being a regular attorney to, probably saving 20 hours on every deal I do right now is basically, the system I've built for myself here at Bootstrap Legal. As an attorney, I used to literally have to, if I had to take an old template and change property to properties, for a new deal, that would literally take me like 5 hours to go through, all the different documents, the operating agreements, the PPM, the subscription agreements. You can't just do control find replace all because there's, it's just not that easy. And the tech that I've built now to do this, makes my life a lot easier, I think. But for a tool that all your folks can use, the tools lately that I love the most are Calendly, right? I just have a link to my website to Calendly's for people to schedule a consultation, so we don't have to play email tag. And Zoom's how I do all my calls now, usually.
Wow. So do you do face-to-face calls? Is that how you schedule them, or is it all just the audio?
I don't. I try to have video off on Zoom when I do the call, but occasionally I do have to do the face-to-face. But the nice thing about Zoom is like you don't have to sit there and dial whatever the conference pin is, pound whatever. You literally just click on a link and that's it. And it makes it so much easier. Can't explain why, but it's just so much more intuitive.
So I was going to ask why you would use that as opposed to just, calling a phone number, but is that the main reason?
It's intuitive. And then, it makes it easy because then sometimes someone's like, oh, I want to bring my partner in on the call. Well, if I'm calling them or something like that, then they have to dial them in. It's a lot more difficult. And also I just don't necessarily want everyone to have my cell phone number.
That's clever though. No, that's clever way of not handing out your cell phone number. That's really smart.
Yeah.
So what about, is there some way that you like to give back?
I think the way I'm giving back is I think a lot of attorneys don't like to deal with first time or people just getting started in the syndication business because it is in some ways a lot of coaching. But I do that because now I have a little bit more time on my hands because I'm not sitting there, manually drafting documents all day long. So I have a little bit more liberty and free time to give in that way.
Nice. And, what's the one thing that you would say has contributed to your success other than a little deeper than the systems that you've created? What's something that's just really contributed to your success?
When I was working in government, one of my bosses told me that you never stop doing your former job. I didn't really understand him at the time, but I think I do now because I feel like the only reason I've gotten here is because of the culmination of all the different experiences that I've had previously. I think if I hadn't worked at that real estate crowdfunding, if I hadn't worked at the law firm, I don't think I would have the vision to build what I have today. And I'm happy with it because it's, it's funny. I think a lot of attorneys, they get burnt out of the attorney lifestyle because you're selling your hours and it's not a great business. Right. And so here, I think I've made some attempts to just make it a little bit more scalable.
Nice. So what's a need that you have in your business right now that you'd like to let the listeners know about?
A need. Personally, and this is like way off track, right? But over the past couple years, I've been concentrating very much on the legal side. I haven't actually done a syndication myself as the operator, but I'm toying around with the idea this year because I'm seeing some slowdowns in the market. I feel like we're coming on the end of some cycles, and so I think as a personal challenge to myself, I would like to get some experience in actually underwriting and due diligencing syndication opportunities. Not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but I just feel like right now I want to put in that time and practice to figure out the numbers side of the game.
Nice. No, I like that. And so how can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about Bootstrap Legal?
Yeah, sure. It's bootstraplegal.com. We're on all the social media channels, but they can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm at Amy Y1 WAN. I'm on Facebook and all of those things. So very accessible. And my email is just amy@bootstraplegal.com.
Great. Amy, thank you so much for your time and being on the show and the content you provided to the listeners. And I hope the listeners will reach out to you and especially making sure they're doing it legally, right? And I hope they'll go to Life Bridge Capital and connect with me and schedule a call and also go to our Facebook group so we can all learn from experts like Amy and grow our business together. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.